This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to call our Wednesday, January 15th Board of Finance meeting to order. First order of business, minutes from our regular meeting from December 18th. Everyone's had a chance to look at it, review it. Questions or comments? Got a motion to approve the meetings as presented?
Yes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Old business. As it is common this time of year, the Board of Selectmen has decided to send us a budget request. Mr. Frieda, would you like to elaborate a little?
All right, so for those watching at home, for those here, for those of us on the Board of Finance, the start of this budget season now has begun. It started last week with our Board of Selectmen meeting. Board of Selectmen traditionally sends the budget over to the Board of Finance, but this is the start of a lengthy process, and the process will include workshop sessions. We will see one later this evening, and then a series of workshop session meetings with the Board of Finance with all the departments that will be either at night or on Saturdays. These meetings will be televised, and these meetings will lead up to two public meetings, one in March and one in April, where the public can weigh in on the budget. And then there'll be a referendum in May. So this is a strict process that we abide by here in town. And I want to let everyone know that you're going to hear a lot at the workshop sessions, and you're going to see a lot. You'll see a lot of explanations. You'll see a lot of requests. But what I want everyone watching on TV tonight to know, and all the citizens of North Haven, is that I am going to be guaranteeing there's not going to be a mill rate increase this year. And that's a commitment. I've alluded to it a couple of times at public meetings. We understand, and I understand, that the mill rate unpredictability across the state of Connecticut is one of the things that most concerns our citizens. There will not be a mill rate increase in this budget starting July 1st, 2020 to 2021. And that's what I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frieda.
Yes, sir, could I comment on your comment?
Sure.
At this moment, the budget that went through the selectmen and presented to us has on the town side, has an increase of 7.3% in spending. And, I do admire your goal of no tax increase, and that's certainly a great ideal. But I just want to know if did that kind of accompany, did anything accompany that in terms of suggested spending decreases? I mean, do you have a list of reductions or anything to trim $5 million off of this proposed budget?
That's our job.
We could have done that, but we comply with the processes here, and the processes are to allow it to come to the Board of Finance, the workshop sessions, have the public weigh in on two public meetings, and then go to a referendum. What you see in terms of the Board of Selectmen budget is strictly a procedural issue that in effect doesn't mean too much, because it just shows what all the requests are. What Ed does and what I do is we say to the department heads, tell us what your needs are, and then we allow it to come to the Board of Finance in the workshop sessions. We could do it ourselves, Ed and I, but that is not the procedure in government. We allow the procedure to unfold. So what you see in terms of this Board of Selectmen budget that we are presenting here tonight means very little. It's the start, it's an illustration of what the requests are on the town side, and we fully anticipate that those requests will be pared back.
All right. Well, it's an aspiration that a lot of, I myself and other people do share. The problem this year, of course, is that there's a phase-in of, that there's a reassessments going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be a little hard and tricky to, for most people in town to at times believe that they are going to get no tax increase.
No mill rate increase.
Well, right. There certainly wouldn't be a mill rate increase unless the grand list year over year went in
We're going to be,
the revaluation.
we're going to be
of the-
presenting a very significant grand list increase this year.
Yeah, so, yeah, but again, the mill rate is times whatever their property assessment is. So to gauge a no tax increase.
A no mill rate increase. For the third time I'm saying it, Michael. I said there'll be a no mill rate increase.
All right, so, okay,
There's a difference.
that's a
Be-
pretty easy. So are you further trying to get to the point of a no tax increase for the average homeowner within town?
So, I'll say it for the fourth time. There's a no mill rate increase I'm committing to. Now, what that does is that we don't know what the proportion of property values going up or down is at this point. For those
Right.
whose property values remain the same, that's a no tax increase. For those whose property values decline slightly, that's a tax decrease with a no mill rate increase.
Right.
For those whose properties have gone up, even though the mill rate stays the same, which is what we can
Yes.
control,
Right.
then there's a slight elevation.
Yes, but what if the water rises and all boats float higher? If the average assessment goes up 3%, are we trying to come up with a 3% decrease in the mill rate in order to have them pay a level amount of taxes year to year?
We can't commit to that right now.
Yeah, okay.
What we can commit to is no mill rate increase, because I know what the top line revenue growth is going to be through grand list growth. We will lead the state in grand list growth this year, or at least be in the top 2 municipalities. For the second consecutive year, I might add.
Okay, I know it's ceremonial, but again,
Yes.
well, certainly a no mill rate increase is a very realistic
Okay,
pronouncement.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. New business, expenditures? Questions?
Yeah, I got one expenditure comment here. Help me out. In the CAFRA on page 9,
Well, before, no, no,
I'm going to
Okay, I'm sorry.
revert to the expenditures. Halfway down, we're referencing the North Haven had contract with John's Refuge, and where is that in the expenditure report?
hauling, trash hauling, probably.
yeah, we'd be in the public works line, Jim, under hauling.
Under hauling?
Under hauling, right.
And you guys, and you, and I take you or Ed did the negotiation?
Well, there's a contract, okay? It goes out to bid. So that's. how that
I'm sorry, okay, I misread that. And the same follow suit for the next line down for the electronic recycling contract. That went out to bid also.
That would have to check on.
Well, it's the same.
It's right, the same company.
The same company that does it.
Okay, but it's under hauling, is that where, okay.
Yeah, and we can give you the line item, the actual number of the line item after, but that would be under hauling, right?
All right, thanks.
Anything else on expenditures?
Expenditures? Tim, did you?
I have to check, Michael, go ahead for now.
I'm sure you got the same thing I have. You got, I'm sorry, Madam Nancy, I apologize.
That's okay.
You wish to go first?
No, you can go ahead. I have a couple of questions.
Again, I'm just circling what anyone would circle if they would look at these. The reserve accrued benefits,
Page.
that, on page 6, yeah, that bounced up 100,000 is, now, is that because of some added retirements? Or because of some added
I have the same question.
contract settlements? Or contract uncertainty?
It has nothing to do with the contract settlement. It's two people that left, one was a long-standing, long-term department head, and therefore, it was a significant payout. But as you know, over the years, this number could be anywhere from 50,000 to 400,000. So we try to use an average, and as you can see, it's already over.
Okay.
This is accrued vacation pay, correct?
Right. Vacation sick time.
Vacation sick time.
Oh, I didn't know if there was more benefits to it than that, but all right. And then, of course, over on page 10 there, in the fire line, I just wanted to know how, what the reduction is in the personnel full-time?
What the reduction is?
What do you, I'm not following you, Michael.
Now,
What do you mean
hold on here,
reduction?
hold on.
Are you saying
Four-
it's not 50%?
No. I'm sorry. No, there was a mark on my,
There's one on mine, too.
form.
Yeah.
So I
Looks like a
apologize.
negative.
I apologize. I
Okay.
can see that you meant,
Oh, if you-
because of
if
the
you thought
right-hand
that-
column, it was meant to be a positive number.
Oh, this was, I like your reading better, though.
So, no, I'm sorry, false, that's a false positive?
Anything else on expenditures?
I just had a quick question again in that same category on page 10 with the fire department. It appears as though the building maintenance and repair, we're up at 92% of that. And as far as I know, these are all either new buildings or newly renovated buildings, and we've spent about $95,000 to date. So I'm just wondering, Ed, do you have any idea what that's all about?
Yeah,
Sorry, page 10, almost all the way down to the bottom there.
Yeah, well, maintenance and repair would also
yeah, there's
include
a
the
lot of stuff, yeah,
janitorial
right,
contracts.
There's a lot of other little things that go in there,
Building maintenance and repair.
right. It's not just physical work to the building, but like Rich said, there's cleaning and a bunch of other small items. It's a laundry list of different things.
I mean, I assume the 22 that's encumbered is probably a maintenance contract?
It could be, or it could be some work that's being done over there, but
Okay.
when Paul's in Saturday, you could run that one by him.
Okay, will do.
Anything else on expenditures? Revenue?
Ed, we may have touched on this one, so I apologize if I'm asking a question being asked already, but the personal property audit tax, are we doing that or not?
Yes, we've we have in the budget $20,000 to do personal property audits.
And we've got 100 budget for revenue.
For revenue.
Right.
So
But
what,
what happens is, Tim, he works on it all year long, and then I ask Gary at the end of the year how much is broken out. It belongs in that account versus, otherwise it's in current taxes and, back taxes and collection. So I'll just reclassify it at the end of the year to that line.
do we do a supplemental bill once a year? Is that what we do? Or
Yeah.
we just, right.
Supplemental for vehicles and everything?
That's different.
No, just
But there's
supplemental
a-
for personal
That was just
property?
billed. That gets,
Okay.
that just got billed. Because I know, because I just paid.
Anything else on revenue? Special funds?
On the special funds, it's just another good accrual here of fire fees of $105,000 for plans and inspections,
Plan review.
plan review.
It's not inspections, but Michael, just plan review.
Plan review.
And I'd just like to thank Ed for changing that category from fire fees to adding in the review. I appreciate that very
I don't think
much.
the whole thing printed out.
No.
Yeah, well,
But your column was too narrow.
it's a step in the right direction, right? But the paramedic program unfortunately is still underwater about $63.5 thousand. So I understand that's still a collections problem, but that number is just growing.
Well, we got the,
They're getting billed.
oh, we didn't? Okay.
Anything else on special funds? Board of Ed? Which did not give us a cover letter this
Yeah, I noticed
month.
that.
For the Board of Ed, the only way to really look at it without a column there that states monthly expenditures or monthly change
Yeah.
is to compare it with the previous month. And they already warned us about the columns, the categories, the line items that are going over. And this month, they're going over even more. Another 340,000 in the red is the special education transportation line, 510C. And again, these lines may or may not be affected by
Grants.
the federal state grants. I don't know if we've really got clarification on that yet. And on the tuition line, another 170. So that is in the, well, it's noted here as being, that account being a probable deficit of at least $1 million. Well, it's $1 million right now in the available budget line there. So I hope we get some clarity on that and whether these numbers here are pre-grant or post-grant.
Is there a meeting with us the first Saturday in February? And did we start the audit that we asked for?
I'm working with the person right now, they're trying to put together a price and contract to sign.
Okay. Definitely good questions for February.
But I'm pretty sure that number, there is no revenue there.
Talking about the special ed?
Yeah, special ed.
Anything else on Board of Ed? It might be good to generate a list of questions for that first Saturday in February,
Absolutely.
while we have them all in front of us.
Well, we should give her those in advance, just so she has.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a good.
Yeah.
maybe that's a good idea. We'll generate some questions, send me an email. We'll put something together and ask them.
Well, can either Mr. Schwinkowski or Mr. Frieda comment on, based on your interactions with Mr. Stirk, whether we should be expecting any type of request from the Board of Education for additional funds? Or what is their current perspective on the second half of this fiscal year?
The second half of this fiscal year, Pam is working with Ed to balance this budget. Ed has a list of all the grants. They are now working to see what money has been spent and whether or not that there's going to be a projected deficit. That's unknown right now. But I fully anticipate, because we're going through this at a state level too, I mentioned this last time, the unpredictability of special ed costs across the state and every municipality. I fully anticipate when they come with their budget presentation for 2020-21, we're going to see an increase in special ed requests for funding, and that's going to drive that budget up as I see it. So the answer is this second half, unknown. Ed's working with Pam what the calculation or what the reconciliation will be. But whatever that is, even if it's zero, I fully anticipate a larger special ed budget this coming year because of the in-placements and the out-placements.
If there's no other questions, can I have a motion to accept the reports as presented?
I make that motion.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Appointment of member of Open Space Advisory Committee. As much as Mr. Frieda wanted to do it, we're not going to let you.
Well, there's a reason, and let me share it with you, that what we didn't realize, or I didn't realize, was that I would not be able to vote at the Board of Selectmen meeting to move a open space purchase forward. And that could potentially create a deadlock between our second selectman and our third selectman, Ms. Sally Boehme, Bill Piper. So we, I agreed not to do it. That's basically it. We never really have a situation like that on the Board of Selectmen where there would be a deadlock on open space, but my inability to vote procedurally, being a member of the Open Space Committee, that superseded the decision about me doing it in the beginning. So we need another member, and that's where we're at tonight.
And seeing how most members have, at one time or another over the last 12 years I've been on this board, Mr. Hallahan, I believe, was on it. I know Mr. Leonis was on it. I think Tim and I are the only two seasoned, oh, you're on, I'm the only guy. So I will make my services available if you'd like to.
I'd be an honor to nominate you, Rich Monaco, for open space.
Can I have a second?
Couldn't second that fast enough.
Any other discussion? Any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll do my turn. Our favorite part of every year, we get to see Joe, and he takes us through the CAFR. And I've said this a million times, if you ever want to know anything about the town, you find 2 or 3 days and you read the CAFR and understand the CAFR, you pretty much know the workings of North Haven. If you'd like to set up and make your presentation.
All right, so everybody should have the presentation. I'm just going to use this as a guide to kind of walk through the 4 documents that you have.
Hey, Joe, excuse me, is your mic on just because it won't pick up otherwise?
Is it green?
It should be
It's
green.
green, yeah.
You're good to go.
All right. So we'll talk about the CAFR, which is the big document, the federal and state report, which is the littler one, communication of those charged with governance, is one of the reports on our letterhead, and then the recommendations, and we'll spend 2 minutes on future considerations, what GASB's been working on. There's notable items in the CAFR. The fund balance decreased by about $669,000, and we'll talk more about that in detail and a little bit later in the presentation. Unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures was 8.17 as compared to the 8.45 for last year. The pension plan funded percentage averaged about 81.37 as compared to 88.5 last year. Most of that's being driven by the liabilities increases, and the rates of return are much lower for fiscal 19 than they were for 18. The town set up an OPEB trust fund this year, so that's in the financials for the first time, and we'll look at that. So there's a little bit of money starting funding that liability. Capital assets were restated from prior year based upon a completeness review and reviewing useful lives and that type of thing. So I think, and that was for both the governmental funds and the water and sewer fund. So I think you have a good detailed records now for that. And that was in reaction to one of the recommendations we had last year. The new GASB statements were effective, were certain asset retirement obligations, that relates to kind of landfills, you don't have that. And then GASB 88, disclosures related to debt, direct borrowing, so that was basically just a disclosure thing where a lot of things that were considered leases, if you're financing equipment with bank notes, now it's going to be called notes versus capital leases. We'll talk more about leases at the end. So no real effect other than presentation. Opinion on the financial statements is on pages 18 to 20, and the section headings kind of talk about the level of responsibility we take for each section. So the opinion is unmodified on the financial statements, which is the type of opinion that you're looking for. And for other information that requires supplementary information, the budget information, pension, and OPEB, we have limited insurance, supplementary information, the combining schedules in the back, some of those special funds you were talking about, is it in relation to, so in relation to the financials, they're fairly stated. Introductory section and the statistical section are required for the GFOA CAFR program. We don't take any responsibility. We do read it and review it, but we're not giving any opinion on it. MD&A starts on page 21, goes through page 30. Again, this is a good executive summary of the financial highlights and the changes from prior year. So I recommend everybody read that. The first 6 bullets on the financial highlights kind of hit the high points, and then the rest of it gets a little bit more detailed. So talking about general fund balance on page 27, the major funds, which is the middle school and police station, kind of what the activity was for those, WPCA, and then general fund budgetary highlights as far as what kind of drove your operations, the capital asset activity, any significant additions and deletions, and long-term debt activity, again, any changes from the prior year issuances or your scheduled debt service payments. Exhibit C, on page 34, your unassigned fund balance, which is the number everybody looks at, is almost $8.1 million. Again, the rating agencies look for 10 to 15 as one of their items for strong fund balance, but there are many other factors, which you have one of the most important ones, as Mike mentioned earlier, grand list growth is another major factor in what the rating agencies are looking for. So I think the town is in good shape from that perspective. Page 10 is just a fund balance, just in a chart form, just kind of show you where you've been over the last 5 years. So fairly stable as far as what your percentage, so your target around 8%. Exhibit D, which is on page 36. Again, we talked about the net decrease in fund balance. It was about $669,000. A lot of that related to the additional monies for capital. I think it's about $722,000. But looking at the increase, the RSI, which is your budget and actuals, so revenues are more than budget by $932,000. You had spending savings of the 1.1, and then you use fund balance to balance the budget and for those additional capital items, and that basically created where you ended up with the $669,000 decrease.
Joe, how much was that, was capital, do you know? Is that on here somewhere?
Capital was about $722,000. If I look at the line of what the change was from what you originally budgeted, which is on page, all right, so on page 99, most of the way down, the original budget was $559, third line from the bottom, and the net increase in capital budget was $722.
Right.
So your total was $970 of additional appropriation. Most of that ended up in capital.
So would it be fair to say without the additional appropriations, the fund balance would have gone up?
Yes,
We had the major fire truck
Right,
appropriation.
that's what that was for, okay.
right.
Just one question, did those capital expenditures also include the purchases made with MRSA money? Or is that just money from our budget?
That particular is just
Just from our
numbers,
budget?
is just from the
It does not
budget.
include the capital expenditures from MRSA?
Right, because
Got
that's a
it.
separate
Okay.
fund.
Thank you
Yes.
for clarifying that.
Your internal service funds, net operating loss was about $819,000. Some of that made sense from a planning perspective because some of the funds have equity. There are a couple funds, the medical funds are for both the town and the Board of Ed are in a deficit position, so something to take a look at if it's just timing or high claim years. But most of the funds are in good shape, outside of those few that are listed there. For pension funds, the detailed pension funds are on page 93 and 94, which is in the footnotes. So the increase in that position was about $1.7 million. The increase in fair value of investments was about $4.7 million. The RSI schedules, which are a little bit more detailed on the pensions, are on page 100 to 115. So the funding percentages for your plans, because you have several plans, range from 0% to the 93.53%, which is a very high percentage. And the annual rates of return range from 3.22 to 7.5. Again, that's down significantly from prior year, just due to the market. So just one perspective, just as far as, where you fall, and again, we're using an average. You have some plans that are higher and some plans that are lower, so you average about 84%, and just some comparable towns and some smaller towns and some larger towns. Again, the OPEB trust was established this year. The OPEB liability is about $76 million currently, so that's something, now that you have the trust, you'll, I assume, be having the actuary be doing calculations and be looking at how to fund that liability. State teachers, Connecticut State teachers OPEB liability recorded by the state is about $16 million. Again, this is the second year that's a required disclosure and presented the report. And again, this is not recorded, it's only a disclosure, so it's not a liability today, but we saw where the state tried to do a pension, and I'm sure that's not dead yet, and then OPEB would be the second piece, so that, just giving you perspective on where you are in case the state starts talking about that again with this budget.
Joe, did the 75 hit our balance sheet this year?
Yes,
Was that the first year, or did it hit was it last year?
a couple years ago.
So it's been on there. Okay.
Yep, so that, you'll see it on Exhibit A, and then the easiest place to see it is in the footnotes on page 62. All the way at the very bottom, you'll see the OPEB liability. So your pension liability, because you've been funding that for a long time, is 26.6 million, but the OPEB liability is
Right.
the 76.
I was looking at something else.
Right. So those are the highlights ahead on the financials before I jump to the federal and state. Is there any other questions on that? On the CAFR report?
Any question on CAFR?
Joe, just a statement and observation for you with OPEB. This is what we deal with the rating agencies. We do the conference calls. We've had them here. And what we always explain to the rating agencies on OPEB is that we are funding it. They like that. We have put it into a trust. They like that. But Ed and I have decided that in this year's budget, we're going to bring to the public, we're going to be adding to the normal contribution and probably increase that by 4 or 5 times. We think that'll look very good with the rating agencies. And they like the fact we've taken the 2-step process, funding and then putting it in a trust, but we're taking it to the next level.
It's one of their favorite topics. So federal single audit, unmodified opinion on compliance. On page 6 and 7 is a schedule of all the federal monies that was spent by the town during the year. So a total of $2.6 million. We tested 2 programs last year, CDBG Block Grant, Small Cities Program, and Disaster Grants Public Assistance. We had no findings or question costs on either of those 2 programs that we tested. State single audit, the listing of state assistance is on pages 13 and 14. It was about $10.3 million last year. For state, we tested 5 programs, Town Aid Road, and you see them listed here, the STEEP program, municipal grants and aid. Again, for the state programs, we had no findings or question costs on modified opinion on compliance. So one of the first letter that I was going to go over the required communications, it says auditors communication with those charged with governance. So this basically talks about our responsibilities under our standards, the federal and state single audit acts, and kind of what we did as far as the audit. It also references significant estimates that we test, which is the net pension liability, the net OPEB liability, the IBNR, which is the incurred but not reported, which is for your internal service funds. All the disclosures, which are reviewed, were neutral and consistent. We do request representations from management, which we received.
Joe, excuse me, where is this letter?
This
The first one
is
that came with the packet?
this 3 or 4
It's in the
page
federal-
letter.
One you gave us tonight?
No, the one he gave. that
Your
came
one
with
you
the
already
packet.
had,
Okay.
and then it says auditors communication with those charged with governance.
All right, I'll find it.
It's
Here it is. Thank you.
3 or 4 pages,
Yep.
yep. So again, that just kind of walks through what our standards said and the other standards that we follow, federal and state, as far as doing the audit. And then it tells you, we looked at the significant estimates and then we didn't have any issues with those estimates. So, and then there is a past adjustment attached just for an unrecorded payable, but. And then the recommendations, so we have just, these comments, I guess we'll start with the good news. If you look at the second page, is most of the recommendations we had last year were addressed by management or were removed. And there were 3 that were repeated, the tax collector regarding voids, it's just an internal control and monitoring issue. The payroll, ability to add employees is another internal control segregation issue, and student activities. The accounts payable clerk gets the checks after they're signed. Again, that just should be segregated. So those are something, because you've had some turnover in that office, I know they're paying attention to, so hopefully they may not be there next year, but for June 30, 19, they still weren't addressed from last year.
Ed, do we communicate these to the Board of Ed?
Well, there's-
She has a copy of this.
and she's done it before. And the ones down, Stacy and Finance are easy little, so I assume,
Send a reminder downstairs.
okay. Any questions?
All right, and the last slide is just what's coming up. The big thing that's coming up with GASB is GASB 87 for leases, so the GASB followed the private sector, except for the one fact that they're not gonna postpone it like the private sector did. So for 2021, all leases will be effectively capital leases. You gotta record an asset and a liability, asset right to use, and that would be including if you're leasing a parking lot or any of that type of thing. So just kind of complicate the statements just a little bit more with these assets and liabilities related to leases. So recommending that as you do business now, that you kind of accumulate this information, because there's going to be quite a few calculations that are going to have to be done to be able to pull that together for the 2021 audit.
And what's the interest cost on the construction projects, please, Joe?
That's rescinding a rule. They said you should capitalize it. 30 years ago, GASB said you should capitalize interest on construction projects. Now they're saying not to.
And that goes into effect next year.
Yeah,
So they have too much time on their hands, so.
interesting. Any questions for the auditors?
Well,
So
like,
if we have a bond, right? If we do a bond for a school, and within the budget for the bond, there's a line for interest expense, how do you record that on the town's books?
Well, this statement technically applied to enterprise funds, so it would have been more like water and sewer.
Oh,
If you were
okay.
building a new
Yeah.
plant, then you
Right.
would capitalize the interest when you built the new plant, under old rules. And now they're saying, don't capitalize the interest, just the actual cost of construction.
If it's funded from bond proceeds, is there a revenue side?
The interest is just an interest expense that you budget in your general fund to pay.
But it makes a difference, so that's what I'm getting at, right? Because in the past, right, you'd have a bond for whatever, enterprise fund, right? And you didn't have an expense impact because it was capitalized into the bond, right? So now if we do a new project and you spend whatever on interest, right? Is it just gonna be on the expense side, or is there a revenue side or a funding side I'm not picking up in this conversation?
Yeah, no, there's no additional revenue side. You would have to cover that through rates or through the budget. You know, if it's at the water and sewer, you'd have to budget enough to cover the interest expense,
Right.
you know, in addition to, we'll say, the depreciation expense. So,
And this is just for enterprise funds, not for the town government?
right.
Okay.
But Joe, we cover capital projects too, right? Because we've capitalized interest in our middle school and our high school.
That's what I'm getting at, right, that's what I'm
Yeah,
asking about,
capitalized.
right?
Well, the short-term interest, yes.
Yeah, we did.
The short-term interest, that's different, yeah.
Oh, what is this?
The
This is construction, it says construction project.
Right, but it was more the accrual accounting. You capitalize the interest or you pay it out of the bond issue. When you figure out how much you're gonna bond, so it's not affecting that.
So which interest are you talking about expensing?
Well, enterprise fund accounting is a little bit different. We do the government-wide accounting eventually, but it didn't really ever apply to government-wide accounting. It was only if it was a enterprise fund activity, but it's just saying not to capitalize it if you were capitalizing it, not to capitalize it.
No, I understand that part, but now you've said it wasn't for, he asked about the construction, then you said no, you wouldn't expense that, but it does say construction projects.
Yeah,
Type of construction?
well, it's just the type of fund. I mean, I don't, I'd have to go back and read the statement because it's
Yeah.
saying it's removing a rule. I would have to get,
So Joe, I think.
More specifics
I
for
think
you.
on this new GASB, the question would be, the capitalization, what, does it apply just to construction projects within enterprise funds?
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
That's one of the questions that needs to be asked, like we have our Water Pollution Control Authority. So if
Right.
we were to do a major plant rehabilitation, that would come out of the enterprise fund. So the question is, if we can bifurcate the capitalization and on the town side, if we were to, this was 5 years ago, we were building the new middle school, which we've already built, how would that apply to that type of project? That's kind of what Tim's asking.
yep, I'll take a look, but I wouldn't expect it to
Okay.
impact that.
Do you see the GASB rules and regulations, adding GASB numbers every year? Do you see this? Because since I've been in office.
We're on
we've seen
91.
it.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
Yeah, they keep revisiting things, so now they're revisiting the reporting model. So what the financials look at, because they have a rule after 20 years, that they reevaluate, is it still working? So unfortunately, they just keep, if they don't have anything new, they go back and look at what they did 20 years ago and say, like, something like this, are we gonna change the rule? This was an easier one, but
So you gotta explain something to me, okay? I went through this in my corporate business career, and I think I know the answer. When the GASB rule came in to start booking OPEB, I used to have the same debate with our outside auditors in my companies. And it was that if we have retirees, we have a strong enough cash flow where we could pay as they retire, pay as you go, so to speak. And it's the same situation here in North Haven. But we have to book the liability according to the GASB. So when we see a liability of 68 or 72 million, that always jumps out at me, when in fact that if we weren't subject to the GASB rule, I know we could pay it very easily through the cash flow and the savings that we're generating in the government every year. So was it because, in your opinion, that there were bankruptcies in municipalities across the country, certain cities went Chapter 11, was this a mechanism to sort of protect that, in your opinion?
you know, what was talked about a lot was, a lot of things were given away through benefits in government, and that wasn't really transparent, so it said, well, we'll give you health insurance for life. That was nowhere, nobody knew about that. So it was probably the governments that couldn't afford to pay a good salary, so like you said, so the governments that were in more trouble were giving away the benefits, because that was pushing it down the road from a cash flow standpoint, because they didn't have the cash, so that's what drove this, like Detroit and some of these really big cities, because unfortunately, GASB applies to the smallest town and to New York City the same way in most cases, so, yeah, I think that's what drove that part of the transparency, because we used to book these other weird calculations for pension and OPEB, was just, did you contribute what you're supposed to, and if not, you booked a liability for what you didn't contribute. And then all this came in to book the whole liability, even though it's a long-term liability, there's no maturity schedule. They're supposed to be funded over 30 years, and if you look at your footnotes, there's like 40 pages of notes on all your pension plans. So I'm not sure it's making it clear or not, but yeah, I think you're right, as far as there were towns with poor cash flow were giving away benefits, and then eventually they had to settle up, and there was no cash.
And I can accept that. That was my whole theory anyway. But when you're a financially well-run institution, whether it's a corporation or a government, it's the optics of the liability are much worse than the reality.
That's true. Yep.
Because if you can pay it, the liability looks a lot worse than it really is. But I understand it. I understand the reasons why.
Right.
Okay.
Well, booking it and accounting for it is just, that's just a warning sign.
It's just
as to what-
informational.
Yeah, it's as to what you're gonna need down the road. But making you put the money up front, I can see as maybe you can call it a premature expense.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, due to the changes in Gatsby, this is why I don't throw out any of my clothes from the 1980s. I keep all my old clothes because sooner or later they come back in style.
And that is glaringly apparent every meeting you come to.
That's true. That's right. It's called personality, sir.
That was good. That was
We
good.
have to have a little fun here, Joe, right? So, all right.
So I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
That change in Gatsby is something I had in that liability. It's something I had circled already. That, last year, we were listed as having a liability of around 68 million, and this year it's up to 75 million. So is that because of any of the changes in underlying assumptions, or, that seemed like a sizable jump?
All right,
Oh, I'm looking at page 62, the bottom of 62.
all right, let me,
The second from the bottom line here, in columns of balances from July 1st of 18 to June 30th.
yeah, so if we look at page 118, that's probably.
That's right.
where-
Yes.
Yeah,
So your liability increase is the 8.2 million, and you can see what the pieces are, and changes of assumptions are 4.6 million, more than half the increase.
okay, so they're having us more strictly define, or if you want to call it conservatively define what our liability would be?
I got it, look at the assumptions.
Well, so there had to be some changes in assumptions that would drive that, like lowering your discount rate.
Yeah, changes in assumptions, I see that as about the fifth line down on 118.
So because the interest rates went down,
Yeah,
and you have to use the bond rate, and that went down, so that's gonna impact your liability, because you don't have a trust fund, you don't have enough assets, you have to use the lowest number,
Okay.
which is the bond rate. So that change would drive the liability.
all right.
Not all of it, but the majority of it.
Going back earlier in the book here, in this document here, to I'm looking at 25, page 25. The restatements that had to occur for capital assets, was that also due to just a recommendation on your part, or was that because of the accounting method going from accrual to modified accrual?
You know, that was just based on doing in some cases, a completeness test and a review of useful lives. You
You thought there was too much depreciation applied in prior years?
yes, you had a lot of fully depreciated assets, that was
That had value?
one of the, yeah, if you're
Right.
still using it, and again, it goes back to estimates, so we have to give an opinion on estimates. So looking at that, if you're still using the asset, it shouldn't be at zero. It should be
Right,
full.
so-
Lynn's right behind you, we keep using those assets, and we
That's-
intend to keep using those
I mean,
assets.
not that any of this matters, but it's just that somehow we were accounted to have a net position that was negative last year of 36 million, and now it's positive by 49 million, which is I wish you would revalue all of my personal assets. too.
Not sure we're qualified to do that, but
No, that's quite a change.
But that was because of the OPEB liability, right? When the OPEB liability came on balance sheet, that's why we went negative, right?
yeah, well,
That's why it's negative 36.
right, because that
Right.
was 67 million last
Yeah,
year,
right.
so that drove
Right.
why you went negative,
Right.
but just flipped it back a little bit because your net capital assets is higher because of useful lives, and then from a completeness standpoint, we looked at roads and land and a few other things and kind of got, you set up with a really detailed list, and through that process, there were roads that weren't on the list, that type of thing, so we kind of trued that up in the process of, reviewing that.
All right. Okay, and Then, moving through the book up to page 67 here, I just wanted to know, this is more of a question really for our fine finance director here, but the changes in the claims and the estimates regarding our health plan, our self-insured health program. And I'm looking mostly at the second column of numbers here on page 67 here. Is this, did Mr. Swinkowski provide all these numbers? I mean, did you know, do all these numbers make sense to you? Or is this from when we went from a non-self-funded program to a self-funded program?
Most of the numbers there are from our general ledger. The only thing that wouldn't be in there were the claims that are outstanding. That we'd have to get from the.
Yeah, now, were we self-funded in 17, 18? Are we in year, are we?
This is year 3, so.
Is that third year?
Yeah, because the
17, 18 would be the first year.
yeah. So because the prescription claims for some reason are listed as going from 30,000 to 859,000. So they had to be covered under the old plan in 17, 18. I'm just looking.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Board of
For an
Ed.
example of BOE prescriptions, yeah. So the bottom line on this here, on this page here, though, is that the changes in estimates went up $3 million here between 17-18 and 18-19. And I'm just, I'm wondering is that an evaluation of whether we are currently funding the program correctly, adequately?
No, those are claims too, and estimates, and it went up
Right.
2.2 million, right?
Right, and that directly affects our costs and how much we should fund it. So, all right, so is it something to consider and keep an eye on here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
I
Just-
can't say I can control it, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah. All right, my last comment is just a pat on the back to the finance director here, because we do see the results, and with clean findings, Mr. Swinkowski deserves an incredible amount of credit to himself and to his department. We're very privileged to have him as our head, as one of our head financial officials. So, thank you, sir.
And I have to thank my department because they do a lot of work on getting all this together for us.
Anyone else have any questions of CAFR?
I just have one question for Joe. I realized that your presentation on the CAFR report was really for the fiscal year 2018-19, but I just have a quick question for you regarding accounting best practices that relates to the current fiscal year, and since we're beginning the budget for the next fiscal year, it impacts that as well. So in the current fiscal year, we have in our budget packet a reporting of our debt in the form of principal and interest, and it's reported as a net amount, meaning the $9.1 million minus this debt service fund contribution of $1.4 million. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on, from an accounting best practices standpoint, whether that is an appropriate way to actually record our debt, because it impacts us not only in the current fiscal year, but going forward as we're developing our next budget. At least our first draft, we have it just as the full debt of $9.1 million. So I'm just wondering if you could address that particular issue.
Well, I think what you're at, I mean, the debt's recorded correctly. I think you're just talking about a budget presentation, which that's not something I would get involved with. The debt's recorded correctly in the financials, and it's recorded
I
gross.
understand.
So that's just a budget presentation. That's a management decision. That has nothing to do with
So
accounting.
where it's recorded as total debt, principal, and interest, it's not really the total debt, principal, and interest, it's actually a net amount. You think that that's an appropriate accounting practice? Or you're just not going to comment on it?
I don't think it has anything to do with accounting. It's a budget presentation, just where you're funding your debt from. So it's not an accounting issue.
Well, it's our budget, so it's the way it's presented to the public that ultimately has to fund this budget, so. So
Right, but
it
I
is,
don't-
it's an internal accounting issue, let's put it that way.
It's internal.
I
right.
agree, so I'm just
But
asking.
from a general accounting standpoint,
It's,
it's recorded properly.
It's
For the
record-
CAFR report, I understand, I'm asking for an internal,
No, you asked for general accounting purposes, and he's giving you the answer.
Yeah, you can do your budget however you want. I'm not auditing your budget presentation. So if that presentation is what management chooses to present, I think all the information is there. I'm not, from an accounting standpoint, there's no opinion on that, because it's not accounting, it's just a budget
well,
presentation.
it's just an asterisk down at the bottom of the page, so it's not really an accounting practice, it's just what we happen to have done this year, so. So in other words, you're not really going
No,
to comment on that.
you're saying the debt's recorded properly.
That's recorded properly in the financials.
In the financials for the
That's-
CAFR.
That's all I'm
And
responsible.
that's all you're responsible for,
to
so you're
audit,
not going to
yes.
comment on the way that we present it to the people of North Haven.
It's management's,
It's management's decision. Okay, thank you for saying that.
Can I just comment on one thing?
sure.
We put in that footnote for the $1.4 million to
Uh-huh.
tell everybody who paid out of the debt service fund.
Sure.
But keep in mind, in prior years, 3 or 4 years prior to that, money had been paid out of the middle school for their debt. And that wasn't in the total, but it was bonded or approved to pay out of the middle school. So that was paid there. So
You
all
mean-
of that hasn't been in there because part of it's been paid out of another fund. In that case, in this case, the middle school in prior years.
Right, but again, where the line says total debt, principal, and interest, it's not total debt, principal, and
Right, and then
interest.
the prior 4 or 5 years would be the same way because it was paid out of the middle school. So that wouldn't be something that would be in this budget.
Do we have anything else for Joe? Everyone's good? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
yep.
Board members, any comments? Hearing none, public comment. Please keep in mind that we do have a workshop after this. Ms. Wemme?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. They're a tough act to follow, I know. I'll do my best. I understand you have a workshop, so I will go as quickly as I can. I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be, in my comment, I'm going to be reading from a letter in part, so can I just approach, I made copies for
Sure.
everybody? Thank you. Hopefully this won't cut into my 5 minutes.
We don't count walking time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Donahue.
Be wise.
Thank you very much.
And it is your sister's birthday this year, so when you see her, tell her I said happy birthday.
More paper, oh my lord.
It is a leap year, I will tell. I am following up my comment tonight on the issue that I brought up at last month's Board of Finance meeting about the Fire Commission's promotion that took place December 17th, where they promoted 4 lieutenants to captain. I brought it up last month, and I asked about the funding, and Mr. Swinkowski and yourself explained it would come from contractual obligations. And I did question the appropriateness of mid-fiscal year changes in the employment table, which is also known as the table of organization. And at the January 2nd, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting, I again brought up the promotions, and we had a discussion about it. But just for purposes of background, in our 1920 budget book, on page 42, you have the employment table for the fire department. And in our 1920 budget book, that was the budget that was approved, it has 32 firefighters and 4 lieutenants. Now, because of promotions that were made, there are 28 firefighters, 4 lieutenants, and 4 captains. So it's a very significant change in the employment table or table of organization. And I, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I asked the first selectman if we could request a legal opinion for the circumstances under which a change in the employment table can be done in mid-fiscal year. And Mr. Chairman, I've talked to you about this in the past. In 2015, I brought this up when the
Secretary. For when the secretary was added?
when the administrative clerk was added to the selectman's office, and a secretary was added to the building department. And I actually presented you with 7-348, the statute that's applicable, and 707, the charter provision having to do with Board of Finance authority at that meeting. And I brought it up many other times in other issues as well, including the December 2018 hiring of 2 firefighters. So I'm basically talking about a change in the employment table. And so at the December 17th Fire Commission meeting, the commissioners promoted the 4 original lieutenants to captain. And there were never any captains in our fire department's table of organization or table of employment. And so, again, I asked for a legal opinion, and Mr. Frieda denied my request, saying, quote, "No need to question the promotions from a legal standpoint." And I knew for years that there was a legal opinion out there somewhere because I had remembered this issue coming up. And I've been looking for it for 5 years, and I finally found it a couple of days ago. And what I presented you with is a letter from Bob Ciula, who was a very well-respected, esteemed municipal law expert. He was town council here for many years. This all, and it has to do with promotions that were done by the Police Commission in 1993, where they did a promotion in October of 1993, promoting a sergeant to lieutenant. And in that fiscal year, this was in the Signo administration, the table of organization had 3 lieutenants, so by promoting, it went to 4. And so a legal opinion was asked about, can that be done in mid-fiscal year and under what circumstances? And so you see before you a 6-page letter from Bob Ciula. Mr. Frieda would not abide by my request for a legal opinion. So again, I finally found the opinion that I had been searching for 5 years, and it was really hard to find. Now, you may say, well, this is 1993, that's a long time ago, but let me just remind you, Mr. Chairman, our charter has not changed one word since 1981 when it was put into play. And I just want to highlight a few things that he's saying here. On page 3, he does talk about how the Board of Finance recommends a budget, and that included in the budget is the table of organization with various departmental expenditures, including breakdown of expenditures for personnel by specific job description. And again, this was Police Commission because it was a Police Commission promotion that was at issue back then. But most importantly, he talks about Section 707 of the Charter, which is the section that I have often quoted to you, Mr. Chairman. And he says that the Charter is most specific in requiring that regarding proper appropriations for the employment of any person. And that the First Selectman does have the authority to approve new hires. However, and he underlined this, provided, however, the appropriation has been made by the Board of Finance. And so applying the 707 C, D, and E, and you can see the discussions here, he has come to the conclusion that the promotion of the promotion that the Police Commission made was in fact illegal. And he says, my conclusion that the approval of the Board of Finance is required to change the table of organization to increase the number of lieutenants. It's not only based on the language of the charter, but also common sense. And he further states that to take a step without the approval at a minimum of the Board of Finance, because he also talks about potentially needing a town meeting, depending upon the amount of money involved, but at minimum, doing this without the Board of Finance approval would be patently ludicrous and contrary to the provisions of the charter. It would make a mockery of the budget process, wherein the voters ultimately vote to approve or reject a budget, not only based on the total monies spent, but also on how and where the monies are expended. And most importantly, he sums up on page 5, he says, "The action of the 3 commissioners in purporting to change the table of organization and to make promotions in accordance with that change in the middle of the fiscal year without Board of Finance approval was illegal because the action violated the charter." He also implies that it would have violated 7-348. He implies that on page 3, but because there was no factual basis that the promotion cost the town any more money, he did not come to that conclusion. But the fire chief told me on December 17th that the 4 captains would be getting more money. So I believe under Attorney Ciula's analysis that 7-348 would also be violated. But clearly, our charter was violated. And so I take issue with the First Selectman's claim that there's no need to question the promotions from a legal standpoint. Clearly, there are procedural steps and circumstances that must be complied with in accordance with our charter in order to make promotions and change the table of organization or employment table in mid-fiscal year. I've been arguing this for years. I've been ignored for years. I will not be ignored anymore. I agree with a lot of policies of this administration. I really do. I've had issues with some of them, but I've supported many. I've had issues in supporting some, but I will never support even a policy that I am in favor of. I will never support effectuating it in violation of our charter. And so I really hope that we can move forward here, and you, as the Board of Finance, should feel particularly concerned that your authorities, as delineated in Section 707 of our charter, are being usurped by certain employment maneuvers that have been done in recent years. But I want to focus on those 4 promotions that were done in December. They were all sworn in about 2 weeks ago. It is clear to me from Mr. Ciula's extensive legal analysis that it could not be effectuated in mid-fiscal year without the Board of Finance approval. And in fact, at the next Board of Finance meeting in November of 1993, the Board of Selectmen unanimously voted down the promotion that the Police Commission attempted to make a couple of months earlier. So I just wanted this to come to light. I do think it is a meritorious legal issue. Mr. Ciula clearly agrees with the evaluation that I have been presenting to you all these years, that it must, at a minimum, go before the Board of Finance and possibly, depending upon the amount of money, go before a town meeting. I also included in the packet that I handed out the applicable statute, as well as the minutes from the 1993 Police Commission and Fire, and the Police Commission and Board of Finance minutes, so that you could, if you care to, get a better and more fully, a full factual understanding of what happened then, and so you'll see how parallel it is to what happened a couple of months ago in our fire department. And so I appreciate your time and attention on this.
I actually think this letter solidifies my point as to why we don't need a legal opinion. And let me cite 2 sections of this letter.
Okay?
Section 707 of the Charter specifically addresses the authority of any town official, board, or commission to make any expenditures in excess of the amount appropriated. There was no excess. The money was already built into the budget. So the town already voted the money. This 1993 story was a story that the Police Commission voted for promotions of which the money wasn't in the budget. Mr. Swinkowski at the last meeting said where he booked the incremental money. That's number 1. Now, the next page says, and I'm going to read it, and this further makes the point why we don't need a legal opinion, because this is the legal opinion.
Yep.
My conclusion that the approval of the Board of Finance is required to change the table of organization to increase the number of lieutenants. He goes on to say it's not only based on clear language of the charter, but common sense. But, go to the next sentence. The apparent logic of 3 commissioners who voted to change the table of organization would allow them to vote in the middle of a budget year to make 10 lieutenants and eliminate through attrition or otherwise officers and employees. As long as the monies necessary to fund the table of organization did not exceed the departmental or personnel appropriations. We explained at the last meeting, the money was in the personnel appropriations. Ed?
Yeah,
What line?
it's in the contractual obligation line. I mean, it's the same with the money that's in that line. That's not in that personnel page in the back. We have raises in there that are 2.5%, 5%, 7.5%. They're in that account. They're not on pages 40 to 45.
So this letter actually solidifies my
But-
point. It verifies my point,
No, it
because no incremental money was spent in this budget, unlike 1993, when more money was spent to make those promotions. They didn't have the money in 1993. That was the violation. We had already booked the money in this budget. That's the difference.
But, Mr. Frieda, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we, the people, actually approved of the increase to the fire department employment table, then it should be reflected in the employment table, and it should be reflected in the salary line item for the fire department.
no.
It shouldn't be tucked away
The public
in
votes on it.
contractual
The
obligations.
public votes on the budget, the dollars. That was the 1993, this was more money. They didn't have the money in 1993.
And the simple fact from the Board of Finance position, if someone is not bringing an appropriation in front of us for additional funding, we have no jurisdiction over it. The chief elected official determines hiring and firing across the town.
No, but this isn't hiring and firing. This is creating new positions.
We
There's a
didn't create
difference.
new money. That's the difference, Nancy.
There's no
This
funding.
1993, this illustration, they made promotions and the money wasn't there. That's why this letter says it should have gone to the Board of Finance. This year, we made the promotion because the money was there. It was already built into the budget. Ed explained that last time. There's a
Actually,
big difference.
the point of this was that the money was there in 1993.
No, it wasn't. The money wasn't there.
I think that's exactly was the point, was that they did not exceed the appropriations, which is why it didn't violate the actual, what was it?
As long as the
I've forgotten
monies,
that
they had the ability to make the promotions, they would have, their logic was, but as long as the money's necessary to fund a new table of organization did not exceed the departmental
So
or
it can be
personnel.
anywhere in the budget then? As long as there's money somewhere in the budget, then we can spend it and we can hire as many people as we want at any point during the year? Is that the point?
No, you're jumping ahead and you're missing a couple of key facts.
Okay.
There was discussion about promotions in the fire department. Ed booked the money in anticipation of the promotions.
For
He-
that reason.
For that
them-
reason.
for
But
them
why wasn't it in
promotions.
the line item where it pays for
For
salaries?
the same reason we set up that whole contractual obligation account. All those items in that account are in process of being negotiated. It's the 300, 400,000, whatever's in that line, is for various contracts that are being currently negotiated. So we don't want to put the money on the line for these people.
But this isn't a contract negotiation. This is the creation of 4
It's
new
renaming the
positions.
positions.
No, it's creating 4 positions that never existed before.
But the individuals are already here.
But they're getting more money. That's the thing.
Well, so the people
The contractual obligation line is for contractual obligations when we enter into a new CBA, a collective bargaining agreement with a union. This was not a contractual
It actually is a
obligation.
contractual
This-
obligation because the contract for the fire department required an increase of levels of command with the additional bodies.
The first selectman read most of this large paragraph on page 4, which I had also read. The only part that he added on was a hypothetical, which was just pointing to the craziness of the logic that they could just increase the table of organization anytime they want.
A new
He's
table.
clearly saying,
You're missing that key
in
word.
sum, the action of the 3 commissioners to change the table of organization and to make promotions in accordance with that change in the middle of the fiscal year without Board of Finance approval was illegal because the action violated the charter. I don't see him in here saying anything about because they didn't have the money. There's no reference to having money in here at all. I read this whole thing so many times, I see nothing in here about whether they had the money to do it or not. It is clearly saying that, where he says, hold on a minute.
I mean, I can make,
Page, well, hold on, he says, the analysis starts with the fact that the police department has the authority, I'm on the top of page 3, to make the promotions. In other words, the Board of Finance and the First Selectman have no authority to dictate the table of organization. However, it's clear that these powers of the board are also subject to the provisions of any relevant state statute and town charter. And that's where he goes on to talk about 7348 and section 706 and 707. And there's no mention in that evaluation about money being available. He's talking about the fact that you are changing the budget. You are making a mockery of the budgetary process. He says here on page 3 that the budget includes detailed breakdown of the recommended expenditures for personnel by specific job description. This detail shows expenditures for 3 lieutenants, not 4. That was the problem. And so I'm saying that we had 4 lieutenants, and now we have 4 lieutenants and 4 captains. I doubt that the amount of difference that they're getting exceeds the $20,000, which would click in 7,348. I don't know, what is your hesitation to get Board of Finance approval for something like this?
Well,
There's
It is
nothing to
not in the
approve.
budget. It is-
Section, this letter,
Yeah.
section 707, you're talking about the charter,
Yeah.
specifically addresses the authority of any town official, board or commission to make any expenditure in excess of the amount appropriated therefore during the fiscal year and the necessity of getting Board of Finance or town meeting approval. There was no excess in this expense. It was already approved by the Board of Finance. It was already approved by the town meeting, because the money was already in the budget. So there's no violation of section 707, because we didn't go in excess of the budget that was voted by the public at the referendum.
The money for these captains is not in the full-time personal line
Well,
of the
we
budget in the
explained
fire
where it
department.
was. It's the-
I know, you're saying after the fact, you're saying it's contractual obligations. Contractual obligations is to be used for contractual obligations. There
It's
is
not
no
it is a
obligation to make those
contractual obligation.
It's a
promotions.
contractual obligation.
Well, now that the promotions were made, yes.
But he
But
put
the
it
promotions
in,
have
you're
to.
saying after the fact. It was
Yeah.
before the fact he put it in, and it was approved by the public. The money was approved by the public.
You mentioned this at the the Selectmen meeting. You said, you kept stressing that the fire chief talked about during his workshop, the fact that these captains might be necessary. So are you saying that anything that any department head mentions at any workshop could then be included in the budget later if there's money for it because it was talked about?
It's
That's
in their-
not how the workshop
Sally, it's
budgetary
in their
system
con-
works.
It's in their contract.
You guys decide.
It's in their contract.
What's in their contract?
Their staffing requirement, command structure based on number of bodies. It's
Yeah.
in their contract. That's the contract obligation.
Right? All I'm saying is you cannot change, and Mr. Ciula, a very esteemed municipal law expert, who I have the greatest respect for, says you cannot change the table of organization, period, without Board of Finance approval. No mention of the money involved.
Well, why does it say as long as the money's necessary? The logic of the 3 commissioners who voted to change the table of
What
organization.
page are you on, please?
Page 4.
Yeah,
The apparent logic, this is 1993's scenario.
yeah,
now.
this is his, yeah, you're going back to his hypothetical.
707.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm going to just leave it at this.
Yep,
And then I'm not going to make any more comments.
Okay.
Because I think this letter supports what we did.
right. All right,
Because
that's a
the-
real stretch. Okay,
The logic of the 3 commissioners who voted to change the table of organization would allow them to vote in the middle of a budget year to make 10 lieutenants and eliminate through attrition or otherwise other officers, as long as the monies necessary to fund the new table did not exceed. And that is the key point.
But when he's saying the apparent logic would allow them to do that, he's saying that is a mockery of the budgetary process. You're not reading it in its entirety. He's using that as an extreme hypothetical to say that what they did was bad enough. If they think that was fine, then by that apparent logic, which is, when he says apparent logic, he really means the wrong logic. He goes on to say to take such a step, which you're saying they would be able to do, to take such a step would be patently ludicrous and totally contrary to the provisions of the charter. So what you're trying to say supports you is actually even more supporting me, because that's what happened then, and that's what's happening now. We have made a mockery of the budgetary process, and this is very important, where the voters ultimately vote to approve or reject a budget, not only based on total money spent, but upon how and where the monies are expended. So that totally wipes out your argument that it's already in the budget and.
We don't see it that way.
So-
Okay.
So
Okay.
if I could just make a recommendation, we have a lot of information here that Ms. Boehme has provided to us. It's very detailed. None of us on this board are attorneys. So I would just like to recommend that we all take some time to think about this, read it. Mr. Frieda, if you'd like to, you can certainly consult our town attorneys about this. But in the end, as Mr. Frieda agreed at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, the packet of information that constitutes our budget is really a promise. It's a promise from the elected officials to the people of North Haven that we are delivering the contents of this budget. We're not just delivering 3 numbers. If we were just delivering 3 numbers, then we wouldn't need this board. We would simply have a referendum vote, and we would vote on 3 numbers, and we would give
And
Mr.
that's
Frieda a
exactly what
checkbook,
we do.
and we'd give Mr. Mr. Stirk a checkbook, and we would simply say, don't go over the numbers, the total numbers. But that's not the case. We meet once a month, and we review the revenue and expenditure line items, and it is our sworn duty to actually manage those line items. Not just the aggregate amount of the budget, we are responsible for the individual line items. And some will go over and some will go under, but it is our responsibility to try to deliver exactly what we promised to the people of North Haven.
Which we've done for 10 years. We've balanced 10 consecutive budgets, delivered 6 surpluses. So we're doing exactly that.
Well, what
We've
we
never-
promised to the people of North
We've
Haven-
never overexpended a budget. We've never overexpended a budget, ever.
Again, that's at the aggregate level, and I am saying that we also promised the contents of this budget in terms of both
And
the employment
that's your
table and
opinion.
everything else.
That's your opinion.
No, Mr. Frieda agreed with me.
What
It's-
you're
he agreed
missing
with me on
is,
this.
what you're missing is we've also called town meetings to comply with the charter in September to go to the public and explain the overages and underages on every
Absolutely.
line item.
Right, and not everything was included, but yes, we absolutely went to the public, and that's what we do every year. And anything in excess of $20,000 that is transferred from one department to another, we need the town meeting vote.
So thank you.
Absolutely true.
We are complying with it then. We are complying with that aspect
We are
of
complying
it.
with our obligation to involve the town meeting in our transfers of the 3rd category. Yes,
So we're
we
doing
are
it.
also
Right.
responsible for delivering this budget.
We have
budget-
delivered the budget. That's my point.
Not the aggregate number, I'm saying the contents
But
of this budget.
that's what we do
everything
every
about
Board
it.
of Finance meeting. We go line by line, so we're doing that.
I
But
understand.
the transfers that are statutorily required, that are done at the annual town meeting, have nothing to do with this. And again, what he's saying is that ultimately, the voters approve or reject a budget based on the total money spent upon, but also, not only on the total money spent, but also upon how and where the monies are expended. The charter makes the Board of Finance the watchdog to oversee and approve any significant modifications in the budget. And he's saying that a change in the employment table, here he goes, in sum, the purporting to change the table of organization and to make promotions in accordance with that change in the middle of the fiscal year without Board of Finance approval was illegal because the action violated the charter. Period. That's all I'm saying. And I've been saying it for 5 years. You guys need to get Board of Finance approval for these types of changes. And,
I mean,
and this letter says the same thing. So I want to,
When I was working on this whole thing with Bill Ryan, he said, was the money in the budget? I said, yeah, it's in the budget. I explained it to him, but he was fine. And then the other day I ran it by Jeff, he said, yeah, it's there, it's fine. So I don't know what else I could do.
So how much
after
more
this.
can we do? We have the labor attorney who weighed in. Bill Ryan, ladies and gentlemen, is our labor attorney. He said it was fine. Jeff D'Onofrio said it was fine. So that confirms the fact, what we just mentioned, the money was already in the
The
budget.
only thing we could do is take a new line item to state promotional money. And then you have your line item, you have your
Well,
dollars assigned
That's-
in the expenditure
but
report.
sometimes promotions are fine because the promotions are
So-
filling somebody who retired. These are promotions to just brand-new things.
Sally, thank you for your time.
Yeah, I
The
was
board-
within my
the
5
board-
minutes in my initial
You're
presentation.
half an hour.
I took most
No,
of it.
He took most of it.
he
The-
started.
The position of the Board of Finance is really simple because we're defined by charter.
Yep,
If there's not an appropriations for additional money, the Board of Finance doesn't weigh in. We don't run the town. The chief elected official runs the town.
right.
If he needs to do something that requires funding, he has to come before us.
Exactly.
Right.
If he doesn't, he does not have to. We set the mill rate, we'll go to a special town meeting if we need additional appropriations, we develop the budget, that's it. The budget is voted on 3 numbers. The
Right.
town, the Board of Ed, and the combined number. That's what the referendum is.
Right.
Thank you very much. I'd like to
Okay.
go into my workshop unless you,
No.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. If you want to set up, give us like 2 minutes and we'll start. We're back in session. Are you always the first workshop we have? It's-
No, Board of Selectmen's first, right?
Well, we don't count them. You're the first workshop before the Board of Finance.
Always, yes.
Always.
We always follow the auditor.
We always follow the order.
We always start usually around 8:15.
A little bit later this time. Would you like to take us through your presentation?
Yes. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for hearing our budget workshop for the Department of Public Works. Lynn Sadowski, Director of Public Works, and I'm with Andy Bevelak, we're our town engineer. We submitted a 2-part budget. One was for a personnel request for an engineer 2, and one was for an expense and capital request. So I was going to take you through the expense and capital request while Andy's going to take you through the personnel request for the engineer 2. So I'm going to start on page 29 in your budgets. If you could all get to page 29. And our department starts at land use administration. And essentially, on page 29, we have no changes proposed, no increases for land use administration, no changes or increases proposed for planning and zoning, no changes or increases proposed for Inland Wetlands Commission, and no changes to Zoning Board of Appeals. Any questions before I flip to page 30?
Nope.
Is that because of pending contracts? Oh, it's not here. All right.
No. No, there's no,
There's no increase in personnel costs?
well, I don't have the personnel numbers. I only have, there are no personnel costs associated with planning and zoning, inland wetlands, or ZBA. Those are the boards, Mike, the actual boards, our support of planning and zoning, inland wetlands, and the zoning
Yeah,
board of
it's-
appeals, like the legal
Right, well-
advertisements, the stenographers.
Okay.
Not people.
I just saw land use administration personnel, but okay.
Well, it's going up slightly.
Yeah.
It may be,
Okay, go on.
I don't have that
Sorry.
number. On page 30, we start with building inspection and permits. And our first increase proposed is for the overtime line from 5,000 to 6,000 based on some actual numbers that we see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have the money.
Come on.
This is supposed to be a workshop.
Yeah,
Under office supplies and equipment, we are doing a lot of printing, especially for Blight, so we're proposing an increase from $5,500 to $7,000, so that's a $1,500 increase. We're also proposing a $500 increase under dues and expenses. And under our permitting software, we're proposing a $5,000 increase from $30,000 to $35,000 to bring in what's called our citywide view permit information into our building department. So that's kind of the last of our legacy training and permitting information pulled into ViewCloud, our current building permit software. Under engineering, Andy will talk to you about the personnel full-time position for the engineer 2 being proposed. But under office supplies and equipment, we currently have a map plotter and a printer. So these are printing our 24-inch by 36-inch documents. They're both over 10 years old. They're no longer repairable. We can't get any parts for them anymore. So we're proposing to essentially get rid of the 2 that we have and purchase one on a lease. So we're proposing a budget increase from $8,000 to $14,000 to cover the 1 unit,
so you're,
and that's a lease.
so you're gonna lease a scanner on top, the printer below it, and just,
Yep, and that cost would include paper and print colors.
One of the problems I'm
LDS.
having right now is because of the age of the equipment, the software just isn't compatible with it anymore. They don't make drivers for it. You can't.
yeah, what do you use,
So-
Canon?
I have there's Xerox, it's a Xerox,
It's a Xerox?
HP is what I have right now. So I have a separate computer set up that's running old software. So if I ever need to print anything, I just move to that computer and print. And to me, it's just kind of a ridiculous way
Yeah.
to work, you know? And, you know, the additional, the upgrade of the plotter, you know, will bring into current technology. It'll also allow us to do things like do reproductions in-house. So like if I need to make up prints for construction projects, to put them out to bid, right now I have to go out to a print house to get that done. With the new equipment, I'd just be able to print multiple copies from what I have.
We make copies and send documents out for bid?
Yeah.
We gotta be one of the few people that still do that.
Limited amounts, we make them
It depends, Sue,
available.
Rich, it depends on what the contract is. You know,
Now-
our latest one for underground storage tanks, we posted everything online in PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let
we
them
do
download
that,
and print it.
we do PDFs online, but we do need to make a few available.
Yeah, no, no,
you know,
understood.
So that gives us the ability to do that. So.
Is the leased equipment have the same size format?
Yep, yes, yeah, it'll be the same size, and it'll be color capable, which we have in our HP plotter right now.
I tell you, I moved away from the HP and I went to Canon. I've been having better luck,
Better luck
less
with it.
problems.
And the additional monies is inclusive of paper, you say?
Paper and ink.
Yeah, the way the arrangement, my former employer, we had a plotter, similar type of a situation. It was under a facilities management agreement, where essentially in the monthly fee that you pay, that includes the paper, it includes all the service, it includes all the consumables like, you know, ink
Yeah.
and toner and stuff like that. So it covers everything, and you basically just pay for the paper that you use.
So this would be a 1-year lease?
Probably a 3-year lease, that's normally the way this is done. And it would be kind of similar to the way we deal with copy machines, you know, in the office. So, you know, you have it on a short-term lease type of a situation, and then when the lease is up, you just roll it out and replace it with a new piece of equipment, you know.
So this price would be locked in for 3 years?
Right.
Well, the town could always, we don't have to do it every year. There's verbiage in the purchase order and contract that allow us to get out of it. The only thing I would suggest to you, think about it, you know, 2 or 3 inch spools. If you get the larger spool and the machine does fit it, while it may not save you any money in this first 3-year lease, I wouldn't doubt it might not be a bad idea 3 years from now to buy that thing for $100, make it your backup when you lease the other one.
Right,
'Cause that's what I
right.
do.
Right.
And you can buy twice the paper for the same price. Don't ask me. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But if you don't have if it won't fit the 3-inch spool, you can't do it.
Right.
Could we rewind, let's go back to permitting software. This is the last segment, last stage, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, Jim, we've had different legacy softwares as we've upgraded the building department. And our current system is View Permit, and the last software to go is referred to as citywide permitting. And it's just incorporating all the old permit information into our new system. So we just have one system to go to for all the information. Right now, we're still going not only to ViewCloud, but then we have to go and ask Alex and IT to pull up stuff on the old citywide system when we need it for a particular address.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah. Under Public Works, we have, we have no proposed increases listed, but I wanted to cover under consultant fees, which is the $130,000 line item. $30,000 covers the sampling and monitoring in our landfill, all the reporting that goes with that under what's called the DEEP general permit. It also covers the industrial stormwater program, which covers the DPW garage, the transfer station, and the recycling center, which is training, sampling, reporting, auditing.
What, do you have
And-
wells set up just in those locations?
Pardon?
You have wells set up for monitoring?
Wells
at the-
along the landfill, yep, they've been there for a long time. And then we have sample locations at the DPW garage, wastewater treatment plant, the recycling center and transfer station under the industrial program. Then we have the new program, well, maybe not so new since '04, but new as in big changes for the MS4 program, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Program, the 4 S's. And that program, we have funded each year through the budget process, $100,000, so that we can maintain compliance with the MS4 program with DEP, which is identifying all of our outlets, stormwater outlets. These are private property as well as town property. What do you think we're up to, over 650 now for outlets? Sampling during wet weather and dry. It's a huge program. It's got a lot of components to it, 6 different moving components. And so while we haven't proposed an increase from the 130, I wanted you to know what the money was being spent on, because it's 3 huge programs, but one in particular, the MS4.
So then next year, will the
Unfunded.
100 go away after we've identified all of our outlets?
Pardon?
Will the 100 go away next year after we've identified all of our outlets?
No, but I think, Tim, it'll start to become less because we'll have sampled during the wet weather and dry weather, and then what happens in the last year of the permits, which are 2021 and 2022, then you start to identify the 6 hot spots in town, and we
Right.
focus on correcting them.
Okay.
I think with DEP, what we've learned is the sampling never goes away. We got a 30-year general permit for the landfill, for
Yeah.
example, doing the samples around the perimeter, and then they flipped us a new permit, it's 30 years. So it seems like it's not going to end.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm quite sure the MS4 program is just gonna get more onerous as time goes on. They're just gonna want us to do more and more and more, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recall you talking about that last year.
Yeah, it's a tough program, but, we haven't been, audited by the MS4 teams yet. I think because we're out ahead of it, which is, to our advantage. The town's been in good compliant shape. I'm going to jump next to page 47, which is the capital improvement, and just cover a couple things that are on there for us. We really need to replace the Public Works vehicle, which is mine, and we're looking for a new building department vehicle. Last year, we had 2,500 building department inspections, and essentially 3 inspectors who are out every single day. They're using either my truck, Andy's Truck and Engineering, or they're using the building department vehicle. And it's ongoing. We've been very fortunate to have a very busy building department and a good revenue season the last few years. We do need a new truck in the building department, and we do need to replace mine. I think it's around it's an '03, and it's got almost 60,000 miles on it. We included also the pavement condition study, only because, Andy has been out to assess the roadways for pavement. They recommended that you do this study every 5 years. The last study was done in 2012. And we include, different figures, the replacement of the DPW garage underground storage tanks and ASTs. Our bid opening is January 23rd, so that's why this figure is still in there. We expect to get this work done, we hope, by March, replacement with 2 above-ground storage tanks. And we have a couple figures in there for Central Block Phase 1 and Phase 2. I'm going to be working with Ed's office to, try to secure grants that might be available to do one or both of those projects. And
Explain this to me, please.
Central Block Phase 2
Central
and
Block
3?
Phase 2 is basically the library lot. It's the lot that's out in front of the library. And Central Block Phase 3 is essentially the remainder of the Central Block parking areas. So it's
Town
behind
hall.
the firehouse, town hall, and all around. So it's basically reworking all those parking areas and,
Jim, we've done the middle first,
Right.
and now we need to do the library and the town hall.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. On page, let's see, on page 48, we still left in the Vanacore track resurfacing, the Vanacore track replacement, because we're looking for grants for that as well. And on page 49, under the Martha Culver Library restoration, I included a figure for $30,000. We're performing what's called a condition assessment, which is essentially hiring an architect. We have a $15,000 grant, it's a 50-50 match, and we've already got the grant, and we've hired a historical architect to go in and start the process of evaluating the whole Martha Culver Library from the basement to the attic, take a look at.
It's in process.
It is, yeah. Jim, it is in process, yep.
There's no number here for the Martha Culver
Oh.
then.
So it's a $30,000 assessment, and we received a $15,000 grant, so we're working on that now.
So should there be a number here for 15?
Yeah, there should be, there usually is in the capital plan. It might be
Yeah,
listed
30.
on another page, because we usually list the whole thing.
I am looking at capital improvement.
Yeah, I would
It
think,
says Martha Culver Library restoration, there's no number.
okay, it's
Oh.
penciled in on our copy,
So,
so it must
yeah.
not have made it to yours.
it should be 30,000, because that's the total of the assessment, up to 30,000 is the total of the assessment, but we received
Oh, hers
50% grant. And we are working on it now. So we usually do put those in the 5-year plan.
So so it's 30 total less 15?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You're welcome. And if you don't have any other questions, we could jump to the part 1, which is the proposal for personnel request.
I just have a quick question for you. Regarding some of the requests for Department of Public Works vehicles, I think, where do I have this? I mean, this might be in the other presentation, I don't know how you're splitting this up, but mini excavator, Kubota, 6-wheel dump flow, that'll be
Yeah,
the next
Nancy,
thing.
that will
Okay.
be Michael Maturo.
All right, so let
behind
me
in the-
split it up then.
Sure.
The other vehicle, with the MRSA money, we purchased a 2019 Ford van, it says ACO, for Public Works, no?
Please.
Oh,
Animal control officer.
okay, so that's listed under Public Works. Okay, sorry, animal control, gotcha. Okay, and I'll get to the other vehicles when we get to the other
Okay.
part. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, continue.
Okay,
Thanks,
so,
Okay.
yeah, so as far as the new personnel request, which would be essentially an assistant town engineer, that position had historically existed in the town for many, many years, about 10, 12 years ago or so. The first selectman had decided to eliminate the position. And the position was really kind of a heavy on field aspects of things. So field inspections, involvement in construction projects, those types of things. Assistance in field work associated with the MS4 program, and some of the other programs that we've got coming up. So my ask is to reinstate that position. We've got a lot of things coming up in the coming years, particularly 2 big construction projects in Saco Point Road Bridge and Valley Service Road, which are going to be coming up. Probably this spring, we'll be entering the contract for those. And my concern is just getting spread too thin, me getting pulled in too many different directions, and not being able to provide the time that's really is needed on those projects. And having an assistant that can be there, that can go out on a moment's notice and check on things. Now, we'll have consultants that will do the full-time inspection on the job, so it's not like they're not gonna be, properly staffed. But to allow us to have a little bit more involvement on the town side in these projects as they go forward. And then the other aspect of it too is kind of in modernization of the engineering department. I mean, we've got a tremendous amount of material that is not easy to find and it's not easy to access. And what my hope was in my tenure here is to make some improvements to the department, to go to a more digital type based system where we have some information that's digital right now, and a lot of the information is on paper. And I'd really like to see us go to more of a digital solution, which will allow us to much more easily access information and be much more efficient in finding things that we're looking for. And that's one of the struggles that I have now is that the reference materials that back up all that data that we have just aren't as great as they could be, and it makes it difficult to find things sometimes.
Can you give us an example of the reference material you would want to digitize, or?
I've got literally thousands of drawings in drawers in my office right now that most of them are cataloged, but they're also very difficult to access and get to. You know, you got a stack of drawings this high in a drawer. To get to the drawing in the middle makes it very, very difficult.
And if I could add something too, Andy, you know, Rich, let's say somebody comes in and they're connected to sewer and they want to know when they were connected, where their lateral is, where the tie-offs for their lateral is, because they're having problems with the connection between the house and the sewer. We probably have drawers, you know, flat file drawers that are just about my height, and you've got to go in and you've got to pull all these paper plans and literally go through all of them to find a particular address, and then say to them, okay, do you have a phone that you can take a picture of this? You know, everything is arduous. It would be nice to have everything digitized or just available on GIS, to actually click on, I don't know, 25 Mansfield, click on it, and then everything comes up, all the stormwater information, all the sanitary sewer. We're bringing in AppGeo to do our GIS system. They've been doing a lot of work for us, but all the other stuff that we could put in it that would help Andy in the field would be so much better, or help Mike and John behind us. You know, a lot of times we go out because somebody comes in and says, hey, I've got a broken pipe in my yard. And if we had maps that were available online, it would be so much easier for us to work that out in the field. Now we've got to come into the office, flip through all these paper documents, if you can even find some things, and then really, you know, figure it out. I mean,
How many is full-size drawings?
Yep.
24 by
Do you
36.
have a way of scanning them and bringing
Well,
it to CAD-type format?
That was going to say, that was the last item we talked about, which was the plotter, which
Yeah,
will
but
have a
it's
scanning capability.
Scanning it into a plotter
Yeah.
as a PDF, the amount of data, just one drawing alone,
Yeah.
is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd never have the storage capacity to
Well,
handle.
storage-
Because it sees the line
Yep.
and it sees the white. And the
Oh,
white
yeah,
is
no,
data,
no,
too.
I realize that. And
So that-
those
those are
those
big
drawings
files.
can become kind of large.
are
But
big
you got to be
files.
careful as to how you do it, and efficient as to how you do it.
I didn't know if there was, you know, how Acrobat has some software. I don't know if you're familiar with a software that may take that and almost put it like in CAD format. So it's just seeing the black, it's not seeing the white.
Yeah, there's also ways to reduce the size of those drawings. I
Yeah.
have a software that we purchased last year called Bluebeam, and that has capabilities
Yeah,
of
I use
greatly,
Bluebeam.
greatly decreasing the size of PDF files.
Andy, did I miss, is there some linkage between the engineer and the software we're talking about? Did I miss that?
Some link between what?
Is there some linkage
No,
between the engineer and
well,
the software we're
it
talking
frees
about?
him up to do this part of what he's looking to revamp.
Right, so the assistant town engineer, I mean, the major roles will be, you know, assistance in field work. That would be a huge thing, to be able to have a little more representation at these construction projects, a little more oversight on the projects that we're doing. You know, my time is limited to be able out in the field with a contractor working on things, and this gives that capability. And again, that was something that was always a position in the engineering department, and, you know, and that was always a resource that we had. You know, and then the other aspect is assistance in kind of modernizing the office. So having an additional person that can do that scanning. I mean, we could send it all out in a service and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, or I can use the equipment we have and the assistant to, you know, to work on this. And that could take 10 years to get to that point, but at least we're starting a process of starting to modernize how we're doing things. And that's really kind of the vision that I had to move things forward.
So what you're saying is that if this position isn't filled, this is your workload?
Correct. As it has been over the past, year and half that I've been here, you know, and
Well, job security.
you know, and if that's the way the board, you know, decides to to lean and not provide the position, then, I would continue on with what I'm doing and do the best I can and, and attempt to do the modernization, which I have made some steps on, already. This would just make that whole process much easier, much more efficient.
Okay. Anything else for us?
Nope.
Any questions
Any
for
questions?
Lynn? Yes, Mrs.
Nancy,
Smrokowski.
can I just ask one thing?
Yeah.
You had said ACO vehicle?
Yeah.
Did you mean ADP, the one like 6 from the bottom on page 47?
Actually, I was looking at, one second. So, the question that I had was, there was a request for new dump trucks. And I saw from this past year that we already purchased 2 dump trucks with plows on them. So I was just kind of surprised by that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
We're not that bad, so you can.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meeting.
Where's the antique quilts?
Yeah, he used
They
to
do
dust
need
the
'em.
photos with rust, so we would get that realistic feel.
Well, my maintenance department, I mean, they do a phenomenal job, as you can see on some of the pictures there. But as the equipment gets older, parts are limited,
Is it more than one copy?
so.
No.
There are replacement pictures in there. I also included those with it. What we're looking to replace the equipment with.
If we can go through your, before we get to your capital equipment, was there any changes in his,
There's one.
I do have, I am requesting staff increase as well. Or if you want to start on
yeah, no,
the
let's,
staff increase, or,
let's start with anything, so this is. Hey, what page Street and Road on?
It was right after, it was right after Lynn, it was the next page. Yeah, there's a mix. 31? Page 31.
Okay. So the only increase,
I do have
other
some
than capital's maintenance of
increases.
equipment,
Yeah.
you got a big jump of
Oh, this is a line strip, right? So that
Yeah,
is-
maintenance of equipment,
$60,000
yes.
in line painting. Well, line painting aside, what's the expenditure on the maintenance of equipment? What do you,
We like to increase it from 140 to 200 to close the gap.
is there something specific that you're thinking of repairing or?
It's just the equipment is getting older, so the parts are, harder to find, so the price is increasing.
Other than that, I don't see anything else. Sanitation's yours as well.
Transfer and recycling, I do have an increase in the disposal of the recycling from 80,000 to 120,000.
So I apologize, Mike, 'cause I was looking at pictures.
Sure,
So I-
31 and 32.
No, I know. So the maintenance, you said, the equipment's just essentially getting older?
Yeah, it's getting older, so the parts, I mean, we're replacing more parts than we should be.
Would your budget be affected by, would your budget be affected if there was any, by this new equipment? Meaning, would it go down?
It would go down because, I mean, it's new equipment, so, I
Right.
mean, the maintenance will,
Yeah.
there would be a maintenance program with those new vehicles, which would eliminate the breakdowns.
Right.
As I was asking Lynn earlier, you're requesting not one but two six-wheel dump trucks with plows. And we purchased last year 3 dump trucks with plows for a total of $518,000. So you're asking for 2 more?
2 more, yes.
Before,
It'll be
And we also
replacing
bought a
the,
sanitation truck last year.
before we go to capital, let's finish with his operational side of his budget before we look at capital, okay?
Sure.
So you have also disposal recyclables, as you said, went up to 120.
yeah, this is a line item that was never in the budget.
That's because we've had to change with that, where we were getting paid per ton, now we're paying per ton.
Right. So that's gonna reflect our budget.
And parks falls under you as well.
Yeah, parks as well. The maintenance of park budget line. The
About
landscape and
$2,500 up,
beautification,
and
budget line,
maintenance of parks, about 10,000.
yeah. Small increases,
Yeah.
but, I mean, will make a difference.
Did
This
anyone,
maintenance budget's yours as well, right, at the bottom, page 32?
yes,
Yes.
personnel, personnel, meals, yeah, that's all plowing and such. Because I'm looking at meals, I assume that's, maintenance is your,
That's yours, right, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, we just have contract driven. A few line items that have changed, some of them a little bit more than, and we'll take a look at, but other than that, anything else on operations before we go to capital?
And the disposal of recycled materials, that's gone up by $40,000?
40,000, that's what we were just saying,
Yeah.
Just to reflect the,
because we used to
the
be,
actual,
That
Cost
number's
of
going
it.
up regardless.
Yeah.
That number's
Yeah.
going up in the current year.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we used to get paid by the ton, now we're paying.
right.
Does that increase, Mike, will that cover you for the?
It's going to be close. I did some, numbers from what we already paid. We're up to about 60,000 already out of the 80,000 we have in the
Well, that's
budget.
a necessary evil, so I wouldn't shortchange myself if I were you.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, the materials and supplies, there's a request for $135,000, but the actual expenditure last year, which is on page 31, was only $16,000.
Yeah, but it changed to part way, that's.
The maintenance of equipment.
No, materials and supplies and equipment? Not maintenance.
I think it's
equipment,
going up.
Materials and supplies and equipment.
Oh, you know what?
Okay, so there's a request for $135,000. Our expenditure in 18-19 was $16,451.
I'm gonna have to look into it, but, I mean, the 1920, it was up to 135. So I didn't change that, item number.
That's winter maintenance supplies, right?
Materials and supplies and equipment.
So money from that would have come out of MRSA to pay that, that's why that's ended up so low. The number was probably
Oh,
over
yeah.
100,000,
Okay.
but we were able to pay it out of MRSA.
Okay.
Would you like to take us through your capital? You do have my favorite item on there that I cross off every year.
Yes, I do. And I didn't request that this time. As you know, we did remove that item, but we did put the mini excavator with a trailer to tow it around.
Yeah, but he always crosses one item off, so put it in there anyway.
Well, I'm going the more effective and efficient way for our department. I know we're looking to purchase a mini excavator, which will help in the road paving. As you know, we have to go ahead of the paving to do the drainage repair.
You don't want to just use the backhoes we have, you need a smaller excavator?
Well, we put on multiple cruises, so the mini excavator could go on roads that are, for example, Bassett Road.
Yeah,
It's a more compact piece of machinery, so it'll affect the traffic flow to a minimal.
Okay.
Next one is the Isuzu NPR HD 150. That has an 18-foot landscaping body, which will be used throughout the year in the maintenance of the parks, the mowing, during the mowing season. During the winter, we'll be using that to transport our T-Rex, which is equipped with snow plows, snow blower for bridges and sidewalks that are not in the central block area. The additional 2 trucks with the plow, they will be replacing 25-year-old 6-wheelers, which are in the picture that I supplied. Item 4, field marker. This is a GPS-run piece of machinery. I don't know who has that picture there.
Mike has it.
It's going to replace one of our walk-behind Pioneer Bright Striper 2000. This actually does multiple things. It has the layouts for the football field, soccer fields, lacrosse, any kind of field it will paint.
Is this item just gets programmed and it does it automatically?
You have a tablet with it.
I saw it, yeah.
In that tablet, it has drawings. It'll pick up the GPS from the satellite.
Right.
You set which field you want in the program, and it'll just lay it out and paint it.
Right.
We did have a demonstration on that, and I mean,
Yeah.
it's fantastic.
This is manual?
That's manual.
Right.
Yeah, we have to send 2 or 3 guys to go out there and measure it out, square it off, and then paint it, which takes about a day.
Yeah.
On a field, depending on what kind of field it is.
Borrow it for the weekend, volleyball, badminton.
I just have a general comment that if we were to provide you with all of these requests for vehicles in addition to all of the vehicles that were purchased using MRSA money last year, I would imagine that the maintenance and repair expenditures should go down significantly. And just eyeballing the expenditures even this month or year-to-date, Public Works was less than $500, transfer station was 0, sanitation was 0, streets and roads year-to-date was about $6,000. So it's really not big numbers that I'm seeing already, and I would imagine that they would go down even more substantially. So I think that's certainly a line item that we should be keeping in mind.
You gotta realize that by the nature of their work and their equipment, it's self-destructive. The plows are continually being welded, I'm sure, teeth put on buckets. So there might not be as much of a drop in maintenance as you think, because if it's a new truck or if it's a truck that's 20 years old, that plow is gonna get re-welded, the salt's gonna eat at something.
Right, but all we have to do is just look at the historical data, right, in maintenance. And over time, we should have a pretty good sense for the wear and tear, particularly of new vehicles, right? So
Well,
it should be much less than.
Yeah, no, I mean, the
past.
maintenance of the vehicles will drop, but with the technology that these vehicles do have, it may increase.
Yeah,
I
it's more
mean,
expensive to repair.
Yeah, it's
We all
tough
used
to
to tune
say.
up the car ourselves in the backyard. Now, if you don't have a computer, you can't touch them.
Exactly.
The metering software alone on the trucks, when they drop salt, I'm sure is extremely complicated.
Well, I think, look, intuitively what Nancy says is
Yeah, it's gonna
correct,
come
but
down a little bit,
I'm
but
just saying in
I'm
general.
just saying there's not gonna be a drastic.
I think historically, the departments run their equipment pretty hard and long.
Yeah.
And you can tell that just by the age of the equipment, so, I mean, I don't know the inventory of equipment they have there, but historically, sitting on this board here, they seem to have a lot of old equipment, because we've seen pictures in years, some of these before.
It's amazing what some orange paint can hide.
Hide or hold together.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, I do have a maintenance department that does a phenomenal job on maintaining these vehicles.
Great.
I mean, I can't say anything bad about them. I mean, they're on it. They get it done.
Go ahead.
Your next item is a Ford 350.
Actually, it's a Packard 31-yard refuse truck. This is a different from what we usually get. This is a side loader, manual side loader.
Mike, hold on a second. We're not seeing the
I'm not
Packard
see the
here.
Packer.
There's no Packard in there. It should be in there.
We got the Kubota, we got the two dumps, the Field, the 350, a Sam Pro, and the Isuzu. Along with
Oh, maybe
jetpack
this is-
lease.
I may have included that.
Yeah, the jetpack actually wasn't even requested, and somehow it made it onto the
Am I
list.
not seeing it? Ed?
I did include it on the, from page 38.
On which
Which
page?
page?
Page 38, possibly.
You say 38?
38? No, we're looking right at it.
38's got the jetpack, but doesn't have the,
47.
47,
Or is it 47?
I don't remember.
There's a Packer.
on page 47?
Maybe.
It's on page 47. I don't see it
47,
on
yeah, there's
38.
a page 47.
We have to coordinate these two lists. It's on 47, it's 5-year, it's not on the current capital. We just bought a bunch of packages. What are you doing with a side loader?
I actually want to get into a more of a safer way of doing the collection roadside.
Well, for recycles?
For, no, actually, MSW, garbage. This is, instead of in the rear, you're set up in the side, and it has a side tipper. I may have
No, I know
had a
exactly.
picture of
So
it.
is it gonna be all electronic then?
No, it'll be a driver and a collector.
I'm confused. Is it automated?
No, it's manually run.
So what's the advantage?
Well, you just dropped one guy.
We're not working off the back.
I understand you're not working off the back, working aside, but now you have one collector instead of two?
Yes. And, I mean, for now, if it works.
I would entertain that.
I'm confused. Help me out here.
Instead of them loading to the back of the truck,
Yeah.
to the Packer, they load to the side. Which
Right.
means now you just have, instead of having two guys in the back collecting and being in the line of traffic, you have one collector on the side. So it'll increase their pickup time, but it'll reduce their labor.
But you're still having one guy lift a bucket. and-
Well, the machine lifts it, he just rolls it
Yeah,
over to
the
the
machine
arm
lifts
that
it.
grabs it.
So
It could
when
be
he
done
needs-
both ways. You could actually lift the can, or you could manually have the truck do it.
All right, so would you have to standardize the trash bins?
No, because the guy's actually moving it. If it was automated, it would have to be.
So he's got to slide the can to the lift
Yep.
mechanism, then the lift
Right.
mechanism brings it.
Takes it.
Right.
Where if it was completely
Right,
automated,
you would just pick up. Yeah.
It would
they'd
just
have to
pick
be,
up the
they'd have
can,
to be
yeah.
uniform, like Jim said, they have to be uniform.
Yeah.
We've talked about
collectors.
those before, there's a capital cost for
Yeah,
the
there's a
bins.
big cost for the bins, millions of dollars for the bins. Because it has to be, rubber and
I'm actually going to investigate the cost of those bins.
about 2.5
Just-
million.
Let's see.
It's $2.5 million for
Would the
10,000
truck have a
homes.
larger capacity?
It's
How many?
31 yards, so, I mean, they pack
Yeah.
pretty good.
They're
Out there.
It's
They're
key to the price
working.
of oil.
Okay, yeah.
I've done
So
some,
they're expensive.
I've investigated on some of these, and they say they pack well.
I mean, there's a lot of surrounding towns use those. Northford, Wallingford. the only problem North Haven has, certain areas, probably more in the ridge where you don't have clearance in certain
That's why I
streets.
wanna go with that manual,
Yeah.
tipper instead of the automated one.
You have
Clearance
tight
of what, the
areas.
wires overhead? What kind
Yeah,
of-
there's trees and
Parking.
everything, there's
Oh,
certain areas
trees,
where
right,
it's
yeah.
just tight for them to use that type of loading mechanism.
Right.
I've looked at this before.
And this doesn't load as high, I guess?
No, it lifts it from the ground and it
Oh,
empties
so
the
you're not going
container.
way up on it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Might be something to look at.
That
Take us, keep going, finish up so we
Not on
can,
page 38. You didn't put that on 38.
No.
No, it's not.
It's in
Maybe
capital
I
improvement.
wrote it in and
It's
did
it's
it.
Yeah,
on,
because
yeah.
I've got your sheet and you didn't put it on there.
No, it's on
So we just
47
have
or
it on
something.
the
it is on
file.
four, it is on
It's at
47
the
though.
very-
Yeah, that's the 5-year wish list.
Five-year plan.
But it's in the 2021 column.
Right, but everything is
I know,
there, and
I
all
know,
the things,
I know.
yeah.
Right. I just have,
I may
two-
have missed that one. I may
are
have
are you going to
added it.
present your personnel requests, or you're all done with the presentation
Well,
of that?
no, he's still got capital to finish up,
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought we were done with the list.
unless you are done with
You got the
capital.
jetpack lease.
Oh, yeah, jetpack, that isn't listed.
Got the F-350, which is going to replace the 94 Chevy 3500 dump truck, which I also supplied a picture of that. And the last item on that list is the Toro Sempro 340, which is 25 years old. And
is
as
that?
you could see on the picture, it's a field maintenance machine.
What does it do?
It dresses the clay area of baseball field, softball field,
Okay.
levels, grades, whatever you want it to do.
You're gonna start, you used to turn the field every fall. You still doing that? You still turn the field?
We rotor till, if we have the time, weather permitting, we rotor till.
Let it go through the
and,
winter?
Yeah, and we let it go through the winter.
Anything, questions on capital?
So is the jetpack lease in or out of this capital request?
In.
You need to just clean up our list next go around, the Packer and such.
The only question I have for Ed, are there any different rules for the MRSA
Yes.
usage
Yes,
that would affect whether we can
yes.
use it in this situation?
I told us last
Yeah.
month.
Yeah,
It-
that's the
it no longer-
last time we talked, I can't use it for vehicles or anything.
Yeah, when the new governor came in, they changed the,
Yeah, when you say vehicles, you're talking anything, backhoes, and any equipment?
any equipment, it cannot be used.
So what can we use it for, just operational dollars?
Streets and roads,
Streets and roads.
trees, snow.
Trees, snows, materials, drainage, catch basins.
Thank God we caught up as fast as we could before they took the money away from us.
You're not kidding.
Spent over $1 million.
If there's nothing on capital, you had some appropriations of personnel you were looking at?
Yeah, I'm requesting 3 full-time employees to aid in my department. The request is for 1 sanitation collector and 2 laborers for streets and roads. Currently, we have 12 full-time employees in the sanitation department. The additional staff would allow us to assist the public effectively and enhance the quality of service of the residents of North Haven.
Did you say 2 or 3 laborers?
We
Two?
requesting 1
One
collector, 2
sanitation
laborers.
and 2 laborers.
What would be the
The
need
2
for
laborers
sanitation?
will be in the streets and roads
Streets and roads.
division.
Right.
What would be the need for sanitation?
Sanitation, all depending if that truck does go through, I may pull that out. If it does not,
Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you.
in the past, we did have 13 staff in the,
I would never let you
Sanitation
take unlucky
division.
13. Don't worry
well,
about it.
it all depends on
Right.
lucky 13.
So I have a quick
Unlucky
question about
13.
the staffing. If you turn to page 44 of the
He
proposed
doesn't have,
budget.
I don't think, he doesn't have our book.
No, I know, he doesn't have
No,
it,
I
but
don't
the rest of
have
us do. It's actually the employment table, and it says under sanitation, for full-time, 1 foreman, 2 route foremen or drivers and 6 collectors for sanitation. So that's a total of 9. So I'm a little baffled by the 12 full-time employees in the sanitation division. That to me seems like you have 9 people.
You got 3 more down to the transfer station recycling, right?
Yeah.
So is that all part of sanitation, or is that transfer station recycling?
Transportation is sanitation, I believe.
Is that,
Really?
Well, for sanitation, we
Mike, why don't you
have,
just call it those?
I thought
we
had
have
it-
3 trucks.
It's a separate
We
line.
have
Or a separate category.
3 on each trucks. Then we have the recycling trucks, which currently we have 1 truck with 2 men on and 1 truck with 1. And we're filling that last position with a part-timer.
So there's just 3.
Well, that's 12.
Drive route foreman.
So one of them is part-time, or all 3
Yeah,
are
it's
full-time?
part-time.
Okay, so the
There's 3.
front page says 12 full-time employees in the sanitation division,
There are
so,
There.
so these 3 are full-time?
Yeah, because
Or
recycling.
one of them is part-time?
Recycling collection is part of it.
That's what I'm asking you. Of these 3 that you're mentioning from transfer station, are all 3 full-time?
They're all 3
Yes.
full-time,
Okay.
he has 1 part-timer, I guess. It must
Okay,
come in
so in
occasionally.
addition to that, another part-time. And likewise, in streets and roads, which is the previous page, it looks like we have 1 director of public works, 2 assistant directors, 1 equipment operator, 5 equipment operator 1s, 7 truck drivers, 7 laborers, for a total of 23. So you're saying that here that you have 5 laborers on staff, and according to this, you have 7.
No, they want 2 more. I think they want to go up to 7.
Well,
Right.
then,
Yeah.
then Ed's technique is to have in parentheses 5, and then change to 7. Isn't that the way you do it on your employment table?
Oh,
No?
actually,
That's what it was, right.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but it's just listed as
No, it is 7.
There are
You're-
7
You're
there.
right. 'cause-
Either that or paying them.
Yeah, because 19, 20, let me see. Yeah,
It's
19,
exactly
20
the
is
same.
already in there, yeah.
It's
already.
exactly the same amount of
Yeah.
money for last year and this year, so if you could just look into that.
Yeah, I'll,
You know, I'm not sure whether it's 5 and you want to go up to 7, or it's 7 and you want to go up to 9.
will do.
Okay.
There's 7 there currently.
Yeah, so it's 7
That's what I
going to 9.
assume, but I just wanted to confirm with him, because the letter says there's 5.
Been that way since last year to year.
Maybe I wrote it wrong. Maybe it is 7. I'm requesting 2 additional ones.
Okay.
Mike, is there a cost? I don't see a cost on your letter here.
A cost.
These are
For
three
the-
positions.
Yeah, neither one.
I do not have a cost. I would
Ed,
have
can you
to,
get us something, just a
Sure.
supplementary?
Positions.
Any other questions for streets and roads? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Very good.
And that is all we have for tonight, correct? We are adjourned.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.